The hotel manager looked directly at me and explained with complete composure that every security recording from the night my wife disappeared had been lost due to a system failure. He said it the way people say things they have rehearsed. I almost accepted it. Then an elderly employee approached me in the parking lot with shaking hands, pressed a small memory card into my palm, and whispered that I should watch it somewhere private because the wrong people were paying close attention to everything happening inside that building. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I am 61 years old, and after 34 years of marriage, I believe my wife Helen and I had built something that had genuinely survived. We raised 2 sons together. We had grown a small civil engineering firm from a single contract into something that employed 40 people. That anniversary trip to a lakeside resort was supposed to be the beginning of a slower chapter. Helen had been talking about it for months. Less work, more mornings with no particular schedule, time that belonged to us rather than to projects and deadlines. The first evening went exactly as I had imagined it would. Helen was relaxed at dinner in a way I had not seen from her in a long time. We walked along the water after the meal, and she talked about where we might travel the following year. I remember thinking that the version of us sitting at that table was the version I wanted to carry forward into whatever came next. Looking back now, I count 11 times she checked her phone during that dinner. I assumed she was messaging our younger son, who had recently moved abroad. I did not ask. Around 10:30 that evening, she said she wanted some air before sleeping. She picked up her room key, told me not to wait up, and closed the door behind her with the quiet care of someone who has thought carefully about every small movement. She did not come back. By midnight, I had checked the lobby, the restaurant, the garden, and the lake path. By 1 in the morning, the hotel staff had joined the search. By 2, police had arrived and the manager was assuring everyone that the security system covered every entrance and exit in the building and that the recordings would tell us exactly what had happened. The following morning, the manager informed me that a technical failure had corrupted every recording from the previous 10 hours. He delivered this information with the practiced steadiness of someone who understood that steadiness was what the situation required from him. Something about the specific timing of the failure did not sit correctly in my mind. I hired a private investigator before I left the hotel that afternoon. His name was Colin Marsh, and he came recommended by a business associate who had used him during a commercial dispute 3 years earlier. Colin spoke to every member of staff he could access. Within 24 hours, he had identified 3 inconsistencies between statements given to police and statements given to hotel management. A security guard who had been on duty that evening had handed in his resignation the morning after Helen disappeared without offering a reason to anyone. Colin told me quietly that when this many small things point in the same direction, it is usually because someone has been working to ensure they do. That same afternoon, as I was loading my bags into my car to leave, an older man in a maintenance uniform approached from the side of the building. His hands were not steady. He held a small memory card and told me in a low voice that he had been instructed to destroy a backup file from a secondary camera positioned near the service corridor, a camera that most staff did not know had been installed during a recent security upgrade. He said he had not been able to destroy it. He believed someone in my position deserved to know what was on it. He asked me never to use his name. Then he walked away without looking back. Some acts of courage arrive without announcement, from people who have no particular reason to help you, except that they have decided the truth matters more than their own safety. Colin and I watched the footage together that evening in my car in a service station car park 40 minutes from the hotel. Helen walked through the service corridor at 11:47. She was not distressed. She was not being guided or pressured. She moved with the ease of someone following a route she had familiarized herself with in advance. At the end of the corridor, she stepped through a fire exit into the rear car park. A dark vehicle was waiting. A man was standing beside it. She handed him a sealed folder before getting into the passenger seat. Colin paused the footage and enlarged the image of the folder. The documents visible through the partially open flap were financial records. Specifically, they were records from our company that only Helen could have accessed through her director-level credentials. What Colin uncovered over the following 3 weeks went considerably further than a single evening. Helen had been making incremental transfers from the company's operating accounts into overseas holdings for approximately 9 months. The transfers were structured carefully to stay beneath the threshold that would trigger automatic review. The man from the car park was a financial consultant she had been in contact with for at least 14 months, long before our anniversary trip had been planned. The disappearance had been designed to look like a crime. Insurance claims, frozen assets, and the natural sympathy extended to a husband whose wife had vanished would have provided cover, while she and her associate established themselves abroad under documentation that was already being prepared when the hotel employee handed me that memory card. She had not disappeared on our anniversary trip. She had been leaving for over a year. The trip was simply where she had decided to stop pretending. Colin presented the complete file to detectives assigned to Helen's disappearance. The footage, the financial records, phone logs covering 14 months of contact with her associate, and statements from hotel staff who had previously stayed silent combined into a picture that was very difficult to argue with. The hotel manager was interviewed under caution within 48 hours. He admitted he had accepted a payment to facilitate Helen's exit through the service corridor and to ensure the primary camera system experienced its convenient failure at the appropriate time. Several staff members who had withheld information came forward once it became clear the investigation had already established what they knew. Police located Helen and her associate at an international departure terminal 4 days later. They were traveling under documentation that had been prepared with considerable care and expense. They were arrested before reaching the gate. Every transferred amount was traced and recovered. The hotel manager was charged with destruction of evidence and conspiracy to assist fraud. Helen and her associate faced charges across multiple counts. I stood in a courtroom several months later and understood something I had been turning over since the night she walked out of that hotel room. The woman I had built a life with had not made a single impulsive decision. Every element of what she had done required sustained planning across more than a year of ordinary mornings and ordinary evenings and ordinary conversations about where we might travel when things slowed down. The trip had not been her exit. It had been her conclusion. My sons helped me stabilize the company in the months that followed. We were methodical and honest about what had happened and what it had cost. And the people who had worked with us long enough to know what we had built chose to stay. I no longer ask myself why Helen made the choices she made. That question does not have an answer that would help me. What I think about instead is the maintenance worker who stood in a car park with shaking hands and handed me something he had been instructed to destroy. He had no particular obligation to do that. He simply decided that allowing an innocent person to be buried under a carefully constructed lie was something he was not willing to be part of. Without that decision, the footage would not exist. Without the footage, the financial trail might never have been followed in the right direction. Without the trail, Helen and her associate would have been somewhere unreachable before anyone understood what had actually happened. One person's decision to do the right thing in a car park on an ordinary afternoon changed the entire outcome of everything that followed. That is not a small thing. If this story stayed with you, hit the like button and follow the Kinbreak Diaries. New stories arrive every week, and the next one will stay with you long after it ends.